From the very beginning, the house had a hierarchy, and Sydney was never on top, not even close. Vera, her older sister, walked through life like she owned the oxygen in the room. Her laughter was loud, her presence magnetic. And even when she lied, even when she broke things or people, her charm rewrote the narrative. "She's just spirited," their mother would say with a chuckle, sipping wine as Vera stomped past with mascara-streaked cheeks and a broken vase behind her. And Sydney, she was the quiet one, the easy child, the one who didn't cause trouble, not because she was naturally obedient, but because she understood early trouble got attention, and attention was a currency she could never afford. At school, Sydney excelled, top of her class. She won awards Vera never even tried for. But at home, none of that mattered. Not when Vera was crying, or smiling, or simply breathing in the room. Their parents never hit her. They didn't yell. They simply forgot she was there. That's the kind of pain no one talks about. The kind that doesn't leave scars on your skin, but etches itself onto your sense of worth. Sometimes her dad would pat her head on the way to work, not with affection, but like he was closing a laptop he had no use for. Sometimes her mom would compliment her grades, but only when other moms were around to hear. And when Vera failed a test or started a fight or slammed a door, guess who cleaned it up? Sydney. Always Sydney. Not because she was told to, but because somewhere deep inside her she thought, maybe if I'm useful, they'll finally see me. But they didn't. They only saw her when Vera wasn't there. In the Hale household, there were rules. Not the kind you post on a refrigerator, the kind you learn the hard way, through silence, glances, and what happens when you dare to speak. Rule number 1, family means sacrifice. That line was practically scripture in their house. Etched into every dinner table conversation, sewn into every birthday, every holiday, every moment that was supposed to feel warm. But for Sydney, that phrase didn't mean love. It meant loss. Loss of voice, loss of space, loss of self. Whenever she said no, whenever she hesitated, whenever she questioned why Vera got everything and she got scraps, her mother would just narrow her eyes and whisper one word: selfish. It didn't matter how quietly Sydney said it. Didn't matter how respectfully she phrased the question. If it wasn't obedience, it was betrayal. So she learned, not just to be quiet, but to silence herself. Not just to obey, but to disappear. That was the family code. And breaking it, that meant emotional exile. And for a long time, Sydney believed exile was worse than erasure. She remembers the fever. She was 7, burning up, shivering under blankets that never seemed warm enough. Her throat ached, her head spun. She had just enough strength to whisper, "Mom," and her mother came. Not with hugs, not with soft words, but with a thermometer and a can of Lysol. The first thing she said wasn't, "How do you feel?" It was, "Don't touch Vera." Sydney lay there, cheeks flushed, heart aching, not just from the virus, but from something colder. She wasn't being cared for. She was being managed, kept clean, quarantined, not for her comfort, but for her sister's safety. That was the moment the truth began to form quietly, like frost on glass. She wasn't cherished. She was useful. As long as she didn't inconvenience anyone, she was tolerated. As long as she served a purpose, kept quiet, kept clean, stayed useful, she'd be loved. But the moment she needed something, the room went cold. It started with a phone call. Vera had been feeling tired, nauseous, moody more than usual. Then came the blood tests, the liver scan. The word failure entered the conversation like a curse whispered through clenched teeth. Vera had liver disease, severe, progressive, the kind that doesn't wait. Suddenly, the house that always revolved around her turned into a crisis center. And Sydney? She wasn't invited into the conversation. She was the solution. Her mother didn't ask. Her father didn't explain. There was no family meeting, no tearful plea. Just a printed folder left on the kitchen table with a post-it. You'll need to fast before the test. Sydney stared at it. No name, no greeting, just orders. Not, are you okay with this? Not, we know it's a lot to ask. Because in their eyes, it wasn't asking. It was activating, like she was a switch or a storage unit they had kept in perfect condition, waiting for this moment. That was the moment she knew. She wasn't part of the emergency. She was the emergency response. The hospital lobby was quiet. Too quiet. Nurses moved like whispers. Families sat hunched over vending machine coffee, the kind of space that holds grief in the walls. And then came the explosion. Her mother's voice ripped through the silence like glass shattering. "You're letting your sister die!" Every head turned, a baby cried, and Sydney just stood there, motionless, while the woman who raised her began ripping her medical records apart one page at a time. Shreds of paper rained down like confetti at a funeral. Charts, blood types, signed consents, all of it. "After everything we've done for you," her mother hissed, "you're going to stand there and watch her die?" It wasn't a question. It was a public trial, and Sydney had already been convicted. She tried to speak, to breathe, but her voice drowned beneath the rising storm. People were staring. Phones came out. A security guard shifted by the door. And then came the sentence delivered with venomous clarity. "Save your sister, or let her die. Choose." As if humanity could be boiled down to a binary. As if love was a knife and Sydney had to stab herself to prove it existed. Behind the glass wall of room 311, Vera lay pale and quiet. IV drips, beeping monitors, a soft hum of machines keeping her stable. But her eyes, alive, calculating, cold, and her lips curved ever so slightly into that signature smirk. That look she had worn since childhood. That look that always said, "I win, you lose." Even sick, even weak, even with her hair gone and her skin yellowing, Vera was still performing. Sydney looked at her and for the briefest moment hoped for a flicker of humanity, of gratitude, of anything that resembled a sister. But all she got was a silent reminder Vera wasn't worried, because Vera had already won. She didn't need to yell like their mother. She didn't need to plead or beg. All she needed was Sydney to play her role, the loyal little sister, the silent sacrifice. And if Sydney didn't, well, Vera had already positioned herself as the victim, the center, the sun. In Vera's world, Sydney wasn't a sister, she was a satellite. Long before the yelling, before the shredded papers and hospital drama, Sydney already knew. She had gone in weeks earlier, quietly. No one told her to. No one knew. She made the appointment during her lunch break, walked into the sterile clinic, signed the forms, sat under cold fluorescent lights while her blood was drawn. No drama, no spotlight, just quiet responsibility. Because a part of her still wanted to help. Not for praise, not to be seen, but because deep down, despite everything, Vera was still her sister. Or so she thought. The results came in 5 days later. Not a match, not even a partial one. According to science, Sydney couldn't save Vera if she wanted to. She stared at the email for a long time, didn't forward it, didn't mention it, because in this house, truth didn't bring peace. It broke the illusion. It caused war. And Sydney, she wasn't ready for war. Not yet. So she kept the truth in a folder named Medical, buried deep in her inbox, like a secret too loud to say out loud. Dr. Holstrom called her back that afternoon. His voice was polite, professional. Too careful. "Sydney," he said, "I need to confirm something. When was your last full genetic screening?" She blinked. "October, the donor match test. You have the results." A pause, a click on the keyboard. "That's the issue," he said. "We have 2 sets of data, yours and Vera's, and they don't align." She frowned. "What do you mean they don't align?" He didn't explain right away. Instead, he turned the monitor toward her. 2 DNA charts, side by side, color-coded, marked, labeled. And completely different. No shared markers, no overlap, not even close. Then he looked at her, calm, flat. "You're not biologically related." 6 words, so clinical, so quiet, but they hit harder than any scream she'd ever endured. She sat still, not crying, not angry, just breaking, not loudly, but deeply, because suddenly everything made sense. The coldness, the conditional love, the fact that she was never really seen. She wasn't the backup plan. She was the insurance policy. She left the office clutching the manila folder like a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. The hallway outside felt unreal, too bright, too loud, like the world had kept spinning while hers had collapsed. Sydney walked, not to escape, but to stay standing. Her brain replayed the words over and over. "You're not biologically related." They always knew. It wasn't a hospital mix-up. It wasn't a glitch in the system. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. Someone, sometime, chose her. Not because she was wanted, not because she was loved, but because she might match, because her existence could be useful. And suddenly every cold glance, every backhanded, "we didn't have to take you in," every time she felt like a guest in her own childhood, it all crystallized into one cruel truth. She was adopted. For Vera. To serve. To wait. To be ready. It wasn't love. It was logistics. And now that her body couldn't be used, her presence was no longer needed. The media room was filled with polite applause and staged smiles. Coraline, her mother, stood at the podium, surrounded by doctors, cameras, and a banner that read, "Gratitude, Strength, Family." A carefully rehearsed lie wrapped in soft lighting and PR buzzwords. And then Sydney walked in. She didn't kick down the door. She didn't scream. She didn't need to. She wore a simple blouse, no makeup, no script. Just the manila folder in her hands containing the truth they tried to bury. Security hesitated. Reporters turned. A ripple of confusion swept through the room. But Sydney kept walking straight to the podium. And then, calmly, into the microphone, "My name is Sydney Hale. You didn't hear that name today, but it matters." The room froze. Phones came up. Cameras re-angled. "This," she said, lifting a page, "is the donor compatibility report. It proves I was never a match." "This," another page, "is the forged consent form. My signature faked. And this," her voice sharpened, "is proof my mother received those results 6 months ago and hid them." Gasps. Shutters clicking. And Coraline frozen. She didn't flinch, not when the lights hit her face. Not when Coraline's mouth opened, then snapped shut again. Sydney stood tall, her voice steady. And her fingers, they turned truth into testimony. "Let's start with this." She held up the first page. "This is from the National Donor Registry, dated October. It clearly states I am not a biological match to Vera Hale." The room fell into a stunned silence. Next, another sheet, is the forged consent form. My name, my signature, only I never signed it. Gasps. "And this, a printed email, was sent 6 months ago. It proves my mother had this information. She knew, and she said nothing." Click, click, click. Cameras fired like gunshots. Phones recording every breath, every blink. And Coraline, still frozen. Sydney looked up, locked eyes with the press. "You want a headline?" she said quietly. "Here it is. I was adopted. Not loved, not wanted, just selected. And when I didn't work, they tried to rewrite me, but I kept the receipts." No one moved. Because in that moment, Sydney Hale was undeniable. She didn't come for revenge. She wasn't there to scream, or cry, or beg anyone to believe her. She came to end the silence. Sydney's voice was calm, sharp as glass. It didn't shake. It didn't rise. It cut. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," she said. "I'm here to stop being erased." She turned slowly, holding the final page up high, its blue notary stamp glinting under the lights. "This is legally certified. Not just a story, not an accusation. It's the truth, and I'm not hiding it anymore." From the back of the room, a reporter shouted, "Do you want revenge?" Another, "What are you hoping to gain?" Sydney looked at them. Didn't blink, didn't smile. "Neither," she replied. "I want no more silence." Coraline collapsed, a sound like thunder against tile. Gasps echoed. Someone rushed to catch her. Cameras turned. But Sydney? She didn't look back. Vera remained motionless on the live stream monitor, eyes wide, jaw tight, not a word. Their father? Nowhere to be found. The house that had once built itself on control, on secrecy, on whispered threats, was finally breaking. And Sydney, she walked straight through the wreckage. Alive, unapologetic, unashamed. The video hit 2 million views overnight. By morning, her name was trending. Not Vera, not Hale Family Medical Fund, just Sydney. Sydney Hale. And next to it, headlines that screamed, "Adopted daughter exposes transplant fraud in shocking press conference. Hospital ethics in question after consent forgery scandal." She wasn't even a match, and they knew. The story snowballed. Talk shows, podcasts, news tickers. Lawyers began circling. The hospital launched an internal review. Medical boards demanded answers. And the world, for the first time, paid attention. Sydney wasn't a whisper anymore. She was a reckoning. People reached out. Strangers, survivors, other adoptees who had once felt like shadows. "Thank you," they wrote, "for saying what we never could." Her inbox flooded, not with pity, but with recognition. Coraline didn't issue a statement. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny. She just disappeared. 3 days after the press conference, she was admitted to the same hospital where she tried to erase her daughter. Diagnosis: stress-induced arrhythmia. Or maybe guilt finally found her heartbeat. Reporters waited outside her room. Nothing. Her legal team, silent. The woman who once screamed about sacrifice and family, now hooked to monitors surrounded by the very truth she tried to bury. Vera didn't post any more scripture-filled Instagram reels. No verses about strength, no filtered selfies in hospital gowns, just silence. And their father. When a local journalist tried to approach him, he rolled up the window of his black SUV and drove off. That was it. No cameras, no press release. Just a house that had once ruled by fear and guilt, now crumbling under the weight of its own silence. 7 days had passed. 7 days since the press conference, since the lies crumbled, since she said her name into a microphone and meant it. Sydney sat on her apartment balcony. The sun was still low. The city below was waking up. She held a cup of coffee, black, hot, no sugar, exactly how she liked it. No compromises. Her legs were tucked beneath her, hair tied back, no makeup, no armor, just Sydney. And for the first time in her entire life, she didn't feel like she owed anyone anything. No explanations, no apologies, no performance, just breath, slow, real, hers. She watched the morning light stretch across the skyline. Birds moved between rooftops. A dog barked 3 floors down. Ordinary, and yet extraordinary. Because this time, no one was watching her. No one was rewriting her. No one was measuring her value in silence or sacrifice. She smiled just a little. "So this," she whispered, "this is what it feels like to finally breathe." They met in the hospital garden. No cameras, no press, no parents. Just 2 women, one in recovery, one in awakening. Vera sat on a bench, hoodie over her head, hospital socks still on. She didn't stand when Sydney arrived, didn't smile, didn't pretend. Sydney didn't sit right away. She let the silence stretch. The fountain gurgled behind them. Wind stirred the leaves. Finally, Vera spoke flat, unblinking. They only kept you in case I needed something one day. Not an insult, not a scream, just a fact, a surgical slice straight to the center of Sydney's chest. But this time it didn't bleed, because she already knew. What Vera gave her wasn't cruelty. It was confirmation, and that was worse. Vera didn't apologize, didn't offer regret, didn't even look sorry. She just told the truth, like it cost her nothing. And Sydney, she nodded once. Not in agreement, but in recognition. Yes, she had always known. Vera didn't flinch. She just stared out at the trees, like nothing she'd said mattered. Sydney stood beside the bench. Still, no tears, no shaking, just stillness. Then softly, like something she'd already rehearsed in her head 1,000 times. "Good," Sydney said. "I'm not forgiving you." Vera blinked, once. Maybe in surprise, maybe not, but she didn't reply, because there was nothing left to say. No fight, no drama, just two women who shared the same house, the same air, the same lies, but not the same heart. For the first time, they weren't sisters, just strangers bound by a broken blueprint of family. Sydney looked down at Vera for a moment longer, then turned. No goodbye, no threat, no need. As she walked away, the wind moved her coat gently. The sky stayed clear. Behind her, Vera said nothing, and that silence, Sydney carried it like a medal. The courtroom was quiet. Not dramatic, not tense, just still, like something sacred was happening. Sydney stood in front of the judge, papers in hand, voice steady. No one came with her. No family, no friends. Just a lawyer who barely looked up from his file. "What name do you wish to be known by moving forward?" the judge asked. Sydney took a breath. "Sydney Hale," she said. "Legally, fully, permanently." The gavel hit wood. That was it. No applause, no music. But in her chest, a door unlocked. This wasn't an escape. It was a claim. She wasn't erasing her past. She was declaring her future. Not someone's backup plan, not a donor, not a daughter. Just Sydney Hale. And for the first time, that name felt like home. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, no name, just a shaky line of handwriting across the front for Sydney Hale. She almost tossed it aside until she saw the postmark, 3 days after the press conference. Inside, a single page, no decoration, no punctuation, just ink pressed too hard by a nervous hand. "I'm 17. I didn't know I could say no until I watched your video. I didn't know someone like me could speak. I didn't think anyone would listen. But then you stood there, and you didn't cry, and you didn't apologize. I just wanted you to know I'm adopted too." No name, no signature, no contact info, just that last line, simple, quiet, unforgettable. Sydney folded the letter slowly. The air felt heavier, but not in a bad way. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. Her story had cracked something open. And somewhere another girl was finally breathing. Sydney sat at a cafe near the courthouse, the same one where she changed her name. Same table, same seat. But something had changed. She looked around, not as someone hiding from the past, but someone carving out a future. There was no speech to give, no press waiting, no fire to put out, just silence and peace. She pulled out the letter again, the one from the anonymous 17-year-old girl. She had read it 20 times now. It still hit her chest like thunder. She whispered to herself, this wasn't just survival. This was a signal fire, because someone had seen it, felt it, moved because of it. And suddenly, the word pain didn't seem so big anymore. It wasn't pain, it was purpose. Not every scar had to stay a wound. Not every silence had to stay unbroken. Sydney smiled not because it was over, but because she wasn't over. There was more to do, more to tell. And maybe, just maybe, more girls out there still waiting to breathe. As Sydney's story shows us, breaking free from other people's expectations isn't easy, but it is possible. Whenever you felt like a commodity rather than a human being, remember her journey. If you've ever been treated like a transaction, hear me. Your voice is not too loud. Your truth is not too late. And your worth is not up for negotiation. Take that with you. Speak your mind. Share your story. Because when one voice rises, it gives courage to countless others still waiting in the shadows. Life isn't a play where you're forced into the role of perfect child or silent sacrificer. You deserve to be yourself with your own voice, worth, and dreams. Don't wait for permission to speak. Have the courage to say no to unreasonable demands and stand up for your truth. When you dare to rise, you not only free yourself, but also empower others waiting in the shadows. If you believe everyone deserves a voice and want more inspiring stories like this, hit subscribe and ring the bell now. Don't let your voice stay unheard.